In this video, I will be attempting to survive 100 days in Madagascar in hardcore Minecraft. This means I'll have to survive the extreme heat, wildlife, and whatever else I run into, all while I explore this amazing country and build a base for survival. With that being said, let's get started. I spawned in and took a look around me, only to see that I was in a very dry and barren area. So I went to go and get wood, only there was none. Having no other choice, I headed for this river and swam up it. Ooh, okay. Just sitting there with your mouth open? That is awesome. I love your teeth. I kept moving with an objective in mind, to get wood as soon as I could. Otherwise, I would be in a lot of danger. So I followed the river further, until I decided to climb this hill. Maybe if I take the high ground, I'll find forest. Hello there. Don't try it. Come on, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. But unfortunately, no forest. Oh, and I was now losing hunger at an alarming rate. And if that wasn't enough, I was also overheating. So I got back into the river with no ability to swim, and eventually spotted something else in the river. Yeah, there were some turtles here that I quickly killed for food. Only they didn't drop any. So yeah, this was a very bad situation. I decided to walk along this ridge, but after a bit of walking, I finally spotted a forest. Only now it was a race to get there before I overheated to death. Come on. Go fast. Go faster, please. I don't care about what animals are over here, just give me shade. Okay. Having secured my place underground, I got some wood from below the tree here, and then crafted a pickaxe before a long night of mining. This was entirely worth it though, as I found 5 pieces of iron, which I quickly cooked. And then I crafted some shears, which I would need for leaf armor. Leaf armor is great because it'll actually cool me down and prevent me from overheating. Regardless, as the sun rose the next morning, I peeked my head out from my burrow. After a while of waiting, I decided to just run for it. I heard a lot of mobs around me, but after getting to a relatively safe area, I crafted my leaf armor and put it on. Yet I still had a problem. There was no food. I crafted some slabs so that when I go uphill I would use less hunger, but that just made my travels take much longer. However, after a while of traversing the dense forestry, I finally found some food. But after cooking it, something extremely unlucky occurred. Please don't be a thunderstorm. Please. It's... oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I was not going to risk it. I tunneled down again and did some more mining. I also crafted some torches and glass bottles. But by the end of the night, I had not only found 5 more iron, but I also crafted myself a shield. Next morning, it was still storming. Thinking quickly, I climbed up onto the trees and saw a lot of lightning strikes around me. Okay. So I made a little shelter and came up with an idea. If I craft a lightning rod from the copper I got, it would redirect the lightning so I wouldn't get hit, right? I don't actually know how that works, but I tried it anyways. But of course, as soon as I placed it down, the weather let up and it changed to just normal rain. I cannot catch a break this time. So with nothing else to do, I kept along the trees, knowing that if I fell, I would surely die. Yet as I progressed further into a hillier area, I got really confused, because it seemed like the sun was already starting to set. I don't know, maybe I spent too much time underground, but yeah, this meant another burrow. And this night, due to my defeated state, I only really collected some gravel. What? Huh? But... When I rose the next morning, however, I was greeted with some really nice scenery. Oh, see now that's pretty. Oh, not that. Before continuing on my journey. But as I did so, I spotted a large stony hill up ahead. And upon closer inspection, I realized that this was not a hill, but rather a mountain. Now, if you want to play these maps with your friends, or even just play Minecraft with your friends, you'll need a reliable and affordable server host. That's right, I got my first sponsor. And that is NameHero. NameHero offers Minecraft server hosting with the right priorities, affordability, and support. Take a look at how they compare to other server hosts. But that's not all. See, NameHero works to make sure that your panel is easy to use, especially for players that might have never used a server before. I personally have been through a lot of server hosts, and I've genuinely never been able to start up a server faster than with NameHero. Plus, these guys have been around since 2015 and have had over 40,000 customers, so they know what they're doing. Now, if you're worried about lag or performance issues, well, I have a test design that should take care of that for you. Wow, what a nice house you have here. Very spacious, wow. I think I'm going to pull this lever now. Huh. I'm actually quite impressed that there's no lag from that, like at all. Test complete. Now, if you want your own NameHero server, be sure to use the link in the description to go ahead and try one out. Now, with that being said, let's get back to the video. Located within the Andringatra National Park, Peak Bobby might be Madagascar's second tallest peak, but it is the tallest climbable peak in the country. Now, Peak Bobby is named after a dog who allegedly summited the peak first with the French, but it is important to note that the Malagasy people have their own name for this incredible mountain, and that is Amarivalanitra, which means close to the sky. Yet as I navigated the fields in front of it, I collected this wheat and crafted myself some bread. Soon after, though, I spotted this little house. It had some decent loot like this armor and these scuba flippers, as well as some palm saplings. But after collecting this stove and pot, I ventured upstairs and saw this tucked away chest. Inside there was some iron, a name tag, and this pickaxe which I collected. After exiting the house, I kept on my way, as I knew I shouldn't climb the mountain yet. I had to focus on getting water and a bed first. Can I get the moisture out of the moss? Can I just... No? Okay. That afternoon, I finally spotted a river, so I drank some water and healed up. And then I crafted a boat just as the night arrived. As I sailed along the winding river, I spotted hordes of mobs along the banks. Only this is when I decided to try and get some string to craft wool out of. Having crafted one of the 3 wool I'd need for a bed, I decided to try again. Yeah, safe to say I did not try that again. On day 5, I decided that it was time to follow this river, until I spotted a structure. Also wanted to start thinking about a good spot for my base, and maybe hunt some spiders for string. I considered all of this while I rowed my way down this incredibly long river. Yet after a few more minutes of rowing, I spotted some roadblocks. Yeah, there were a lot of crocodiles here. So I decided to collect my boat and just run for it. Don't do it! Don't... Yeah, I was ready that time. Did you see that? I was ready. After dealing with my hardcore nemesis, I found myself at what seemed to be the shore. And I could tell thanks to this whale shark that was just chilling here. But this gave me the idea to try and find some shipwrecks. Only this idea soon proved to be a terrible one. I don't know what that is. I hope it's friendly. Okay. Okay. It's not funny. It's just not. It's okay. After being jump scared for about a minute straight, I did actually spot something incredibly helpful. As I approached the ship, though, I knew that I would only be taking wool for now, as there were these weird skeleton creatures on the ship. So I got my wool and left, before heading to the shore, crafting a bed, and finally going to sleep. The next morning, I knew it was time for me to start finding a spot for my base. So, with that in mind, I continued up the coast. See, I wanted a somewhat wooded area, as it would match the design that I had in mind for my base. Only as I kept along the coast, I just kept seeing more and more sharks. Now, these are mako sharks, which are aggressive maritime predators that also happen to be the fastest sharks in the ocean. So I definitely wanted to be cautious around them, but that soon didn't matter as I spotted a forest. After approaching the wooded area, it was clear that this would be a perfect spot for my base. So I got to work on my outline. And yeah, this base was going to be unlike any other I've made. Here's my design for it. Kind of like the Swiss Family Robinson treehouse, if you're old enough to get that reference. So yeah, that meant that I had to craft the entire tree myself. So for now, I would use cobblestone to give it a nice base outline. This base work continued into day 7, as I wanted to at least finish the trunk outline before I explored again. So I did a lot of building and mining, which also led me to find 7 iron nuggets. Anyways, I made some ladders and collected a lot more stone, before getting some decent progress done on the trunk. The next day, I decided would be my final day of base building for now, as I mined a lot more, ended up finding 9 iron this time, broke my iron pickaxe, and just kept building. I just got really low from fall damage, but come on, it's me. Fall damage is my best friend. Anyways, that evening, I had completed a basic structural outline of the trunk. So that meant on day 9, it was time for me to explore. Alright base, I will be back to you. I went to the coast and healed up, before placing this marker here so that I could find my base easily. Then I decided to go up the coast, as I hadn't been up here yet. However, after a good bit of rowing, I spotted this river opening that led me to another minefield of crocs. Strafe, 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 strafe. After weaving through the scaly waters, I found myself rowing in a rather scenic area. I continued rowing into the evening, where I spotted a swarm of pillagers. Not wanting to engage with them just yet, I simply continued down the river. In other words, I just ignored them. Next morning, as I rode further into the arid landscape, I found myself surrounded by hilly cliffs on either side of the river. So I decided to leave the river and climb these hills, as this would give me a good vantage point to find structures and wonders. But I didn't really see much from up here. Since I was sick of rowing, I just continued into the dry landscape, and eventually came to this rocky area. That's when I noticed I was really low on food. But I soon became distracted, as I spotted a strange structure in the distance. Bringing my attention back to the food, I placed the stove and pot that I had collected, and tried to cook some rice. And guess what? It actually worked. I ended up having to craft some bowls, but after doing so, I ate my rice quite happily. The next morning, I approached the strange, deserty structure. This doesn't look like a scary house. Let's loot it has. Okay, I'm sorry for my... Oh, yeah, there was a weird magic witch pillager guy in the house, and he just started blowing up parts of his own house. So I tried to put him in my boat, of course, and he hit me for a lot of health. I'm not gonna put you in that boat. I'm not gonna put you in that boat. I'm not gonna put you in that boat. I decided to go back to the house though, as I needed water to heal, and I saw that he had a cauldron. So I carefully approached it, and mined into the side of the house, and then found the water. Then I made a smart choice, and that was to leave. After a bit of travel, I spotted some hills and headed in that direction, but I really needed to heal some more, so I headed in the general direction of the shore. Next day, I no longer had the ability to sprint, yet as I continued slowly through this dry land, I spotted some trees up ahead, and not just any trees. See, these were Baobab trees, and a lot of them. So that meant that I was not in southern Madagascar, but rather at one of Madagascar's most famous wonders. The Avenue of the Baobabs is a grove of over 20 of these ancient trees, where of all 9 species of baobab, Madagascar contains 6 of them. That's why it's the national tree of Madagascar. And the Avenue of the Baobabs is the perfect place to see why these trees are so unique. Not only are they known as upside-down trees, due to the fact that it looks like it was planted upside down, but the oldest baobab in the world is around 2,000 years old. Yet, before I could stop and take a look at these trees, I had to get water. I spotted this pond and healed up, before then heading back to the dirt path that ran through the avenue. I figured I should start heading back to my base tomorrow, but I decided to stay here for the famous sunset that happens here at the Avenue of the Baobabs, just to see if it would still be a spectacle in Minecraft. On day 13, I headed towards the shore, and made it there pretty quickly. I then started to head south, with no idea of how far away I was. But after spotting a hill, I decided to walk a bit so I could get my bearings. Only that's when I spotted a strange creature. See, this was a fossa, a native Malagasy mammal, that also happens to be the largest carnivorous mammal on the entire island. But more on the fossas later. For now, I tried to get it in my boat. I then rowed it towards the shore, and after continuing towards my base for a bit, this happened. Ooh. Okay, that was a lot of damage. Yeah, I had to leave the boat, and sadly the fossa was still in it. So, the next morning I carefully monitored the sharks as I crafted an iron axe and water bucket. Yet, as I approached the makos, they quickly swam away. Probably a smart idea for them. Anyways, I took the fossa and continued south. And after a lot more rowing, I was starting to think that I was lost. But that afternoon I spotted my marker. And before heading to sleep, I tried to come up with a name for my fossa. But I had no luck. Until the next morning. I will name you Sherbert. Don't you do it, don't you do it, don't you... How did I miss that? After putting myself on an FBI watch list, I continued to my base, and then got to work. Yeah, I collected tons of wood, and finally started layering the cobblestone with it. And then it started to get really hazy around my base, so I just assumed that it was raining. But I kept building. Next morning I realized that this base was going to be a lot of work, so I chopped down a lot of trees. Now, Madagascar was actually a French colony starting in the late 19th century, but the Malagasy people, who were there long before the French, gained full independence for their country in 1960. This French influence is still seen in some of the architecture of Madagascar's capital city, Antananarivo. But history aside, I soon spotted a pillager group approaching my base. So I pulled the Thailand maneuver and killed them pretty quickly. Once again, I almost felt bad for them, but they do it to themselves. Regardless, I kept building up my base. Into day 17, where I decided that this would be the last day before I head out to explore again. This time I wanted to head to the east coast of Madagascar, as I was right on the west coast. Anyways, a lot more wood collecting ensued, before I broke yet another iron axe. But after crafting a new one, I was about 90% done with the trunk exterior. Next morning, I sorted my items and checked on Sherbert before heading east on my eastern expedition. I walked through the rest of this forest around my base, and didn't make it far before realizing that I had actually put my base right next to one of Madagascar's national parks. Yeah, I do stupid things sometimes, but honestly, I wouldn't even call this stupid, as this national park is quite an incredible one. Isalo National Park is one of Madagascar's most visited parks, as travelers make the trek to see the vast sandstone cliffs, the tropical rock walls lined with waterfalls, and the seemingly endless horizon that comes with visiting this windswept land. But among the picturesque canyons and scenic waterways is a dry and tropical climate that can lead to it being pretty warm here. So if you ever visit it, make sure you're well equipped. As I walked through this vibrant land, I once again found myself collecting wheat and making bread. And just as I needed water, I found these water valleys, which I quickly descended down to and filled my thirst bar with. Next morning, I walked to the top of these valleys and got an amazing view, before spotting a light in one of them. That is, a light. I approached the lantern and saw a barrel near it. Upon opening the barrel, I found some pretty cool loot, like this spyglass. I then saw that there were stone brick walls here, so being the curious explorer I am, I broke through these walls and got the surprise of my life when this thing crawled through. Yeah, I went to attack it, but that proved to be an almost fatal mistake. Thinking quickly, I got back in the water and healed up some. Before taking another shot at it. This time I only made space for one hole in the wall, and that seemed to work pretty well, as after a few hits, I had killed it. Oh, okay, alright. Inside the cavern was this chest that was filled with some really nice loot, aside from all the tentacle food. But I collected these mangoes, this straddle board that I had to try out, and this scarf. Don't know why I'd be wearing a scarf in Madagascar, but you know. And then I continued east in the national park, into day 20, where I spotted this green forest. This prompted me to do some tree jumping, which, after a painful fall, I then stopped doing. I kept through the forest and theorized that I was getting closer to the east coast, as the eastern part of Madagascar is the most tropical part. But as the sun began to set, I realized that I wasn't quite in eastern Madagascar yet. No, I was back at Peak Bobby instead. On day 21, I decided that I might as well try and climb the peak, so I finished looting this cabin, and then started on my summiting expedition. The seagull definitely confused me a bit, but as I started to get higher and higher, the temperature only got lower and lower, and I started to freeze. So I ran down the mountain as fast as possible, but it was already too late. Yeah, once again, I was reduced to 1 heart. The difficulty rating for Madagascar is going to be fun. Anyways, I figured that summiting the mountain would not be the best choice right now, so I continued through the rocky steps behind it. The next morning, I kept on my journey to the east, and that's when I spotted some wildlife like this fossa and this tortoise. But as I continued into a bit of a drier forest, I spotted Madagascar's most famous animal. The ring-tailed lemur, like all other lemurs, are only found in the wild in Madagascar and the surrounding islands. However, their true origin is not entirely known, as it's theorized that these little guys floated to Madagascar from mainland Africa on little rafts of leaves and brush. And yeah, I'm not making that up. That's the leading theory in the science community. Nowadays though, the ring-tailed lemur is unfortunately an endangered species, and like many other endangered species I cover, this is due to deforestation and subsequent habitat loss. But organizations like the WWF are working to protect these lemurs, and just like the jaguars in the Amazon, hope is on the horizon. Now I do want to mention that this mob was created by Steve Locks, so as always, it is linked in the description below. I continued through the forest until I eventually spotted some sand, and that meant I was on the east coast. So with my priorities in mind, I placed the straddle board and, well, tried to straddle. Yeah, maybe I was doing this wrong. Either way, the next day I decided it was time to head home. This time though, I wanted to head underneath Madagascar, and then go up the west coast to get home. So I got in my boat and started the journey. And then I realized that this was the most ridiculous that I've ever looked. Anyways, as I was watching for sharks, I ended up doing a huge amount of rowing. Maybe that's because Madagascar has a total coastline of around 3,000 miles, or almost 5,000 kilometers. This, plus its incredible biodiversity, have earned it the title of the honorary 8th continent, as up to 90% of all plants and animals on this island belong only to Madagascar. Now that is really incredible. By that night, I hadn't even reached the southern tip of the island. But that changed the next morning as I began to row in a diagonal. I then spotted a float of crocodiles. But get this, if they're on land, they're called a basque. Anyways, random facts aside, I soon spotted a structure. It looked like a normal desert temple, but red. After fighting this witch and skeleton, it appeared that it was a normal desert temple. Almost. As these chests were trap chests. Glad that I decided to be observant today. Anyways, I collected all the TNT below and then looted the chests, and I was genuinely surprised at what I saw inside. There was a backpack that I stored all my items in, golden apples, but most importantly, a god apple? This is my first ever god apple in this series, and I really did not expect to find one here. But regardless, that night I saw a really nice sunset. On day 25, I made my way across the bottom of Madagascar, and soon enough I spotted a whale. I knew I was in familiar territory though when I spotted some sharks. And then this happened. I genuinely cannot believe that I am once again reduced to half a heart in this program. I've never had this many close calls, and I'm only on day 25. Either way, I had to think fast. I quickly got some sand and suffocated this mako. Before spotting another great sunset. Next morning, with the coast clear, I rowed out into the water, and once again got attacked. This time I went in and just killed it. Now, I do have to note that mako sharks are recognized as an endangered species, and I do not support the killing of them in any way. But this is Minecraft, and I'm trying to survive. With that being said, I finally spotted my marker, and then Sherbert, who was doing just fine. As it started to rain, I made it back to my base, knowing that I had some work to do. And yeah, this means that the mandatory base montage will now begin. So, let's get building. I collected a ton of wood, mined some iron, and fought this roach, before collecting cobblestone the next morning. I then spotted this wandering trader, who kindly dropped his leads and some leather, before starting on my treehouse branch, and moving on to the other branches, and yeah, I placed a lot of wood. Next day, I worked on relocating Sherbert, but noticed she couldn't be led with a lead, so I pushed her up slabs, and then rode her about halfway, before finishing the day with some more branch work. On day 29, I made this anvil and named this name tag Sherbert, before realizing that Fossas also can't be named. So yeah, unfortunately this does mean that I had to let this Fossa go, as there is just no way to bring it to my base and keep it there. I would simply have to find another Sherbert. But sad stuff aside, I started on the trunk interior, before beginning my final housework day, which consisted of a very large amount of collecting. I also made some rice and broke my pickaxe. Which means that on day 31 my montage was over, and it was finally time for my northern expedition. See, if you add the word expedition to something, it just sounds cool automatically. Anyways, I headed for the coast, and after a bit of ocean travel, I spotted the Avenue of the Baobabs. Upon passing it, I was now in entirely new territory. So, while I rode up the coast for a long time, I also took periodic checks inland, until I came across a river opening the next morning. This river had some large ridges, which convinced me to then leave the water and walk along them, as they would be a much better vantage point. I then mined some terracotta and towered up, before using my spyglass to take a look around me. That's when I spotted this stony texture nearby, which made me think that I was either near a mountain or one of my favorite wonders. So, upon following the stone texture, I was pleasantly surprised when I saw this big spire sticking up. That meant that I was, in fact, at one of my favorite wonders. The Tsingy de Bamaraha is both a geographic anomaly and a natural wonder unlike any other. This World Heritage Site began forming around 200 million years ago, and has spires averaging around 300 feet tall, or almost 100 meters. Now, the word Tsingy famously translates to where one can't walk barefoot, and I'd say that's pretty accurate. Regardless, this incredible wonder is the largest stone forest in the world, and one of the most impressive natural formations I've been able to talk about. As I continued through the wonder, I spotted a rope bridge. So I climbed up these ladders and found this chest that had some decent loot, like this redstone backpack, and leggings that gave me the ability to double jump. I then had a moment of panic as I realized I'd forgotten my bed. So a furious search ensued as I ran through the fenced section of this wonder, looking for either wool or a bed. However, luck was on my side, as I found this sleeping bag that I quickly used. Next morning I woke up and fought this weird looking zombie. No, just, yeah. Okay. Or not. Before noticing this wooden box next to the sleeping bag. After breaking it, tons of loot fell out. Like these eggs, a dirt bomb, these boots that made me run faster on sand, and dynamite. Yeah, not sure why that was here, but I'll take it. Anyways, I continued my climb and got my spyglass out. What? It tells me things? It was then time for me to move on, so I headed back towards the river from earlier, and got spontaneous bursts of speed as I walked across the red sand. Yeah, it was a bit annoying. Anyways, I eventually found the river and continued following it, planning to not stop from here, even if there was a good vantage point. I also wanted to find a new sherbet. On day 34, after I opened some coconuts, I continued down the river, and the hills around me were definitely getting higher. After a bit more rowing, I spotted something interesting. I approached this stone structure, and after removing my running boots, I entered it. No thanks. Yeah, no, I'm okay. I looked at the loot upstairs first and found this diamond chestplate out of nowhere. So I happily took it before using a water bucket to descend down the pit. It wasn't long until I spotted some enemies though. Oh. Okay, fine. But I was able to quickly break the first spawner, and shortly after, I found some golden apples. Yet, after turning this corner, I spotted a weird magic man. What are you? Provoker? No. After staying the night in the underground maze, I woke the next morning and did a bit more exploring. I broke this spawner and found lots of empty chests, before deciding to just leave. At this point, the risk probably wasn't worth it. So I continued up the river, until shortly after I came to a dead end. So now it was time for some jungle travel. This just confirmed that I was in eastern Madagascar, as I was in a very tropical mountain range. I continued hiking north through these mountains, and that night, as the forestry thinned out, I caught a glimpse of Antananarivo. You scared me, but in a good way? I woke up the next morning and planned to keep north, as I knew there was a wonder near Antananarivo, so after failing to attach this lemur to my lead, I moved past the city and climbed up even more mountains. This day was mostly a lot of hiking and climbing, and I soon decided that if I can find this wonder, I would probably head home after. And luckily for me, I spotted it that evening. The next morning I approached the structure, a structure that is both a sacred and royal representation of Madagascar. The royal hill of Ambohimenga was the religious capital of the Kingdom of Madagascar, serving as a testament to Madagascar's independent and colonial past. This site represented the unification of the Malagasy people, also standing as a sacred burial ground for past royalty. As a nation, Madagascar has been through a lot, and this is a divine reminder of that history. I entered one of the buildings and saw a really cool painting, before seeing that the drawers were actually full of things for me to use, like this armor that, after putting it on, made me overheat. So I got some leaves and made new armor, before seeing an incredibly helpful relic. See, this antidote bottle removed negative effects for me. I explored the rest of the hill before seeing a really great sunset that night at this spiritually immortal location. Next morning I woke up ready to head home, and that's just what I did. Yet I reminded myself that I still wanted to find a companion. So I got in this river and headed up it, hopefully to the coast. Now this is the Betsiboka River, a red river that gets its hue from the sediment that it carries to the ocean. I kept along the river into the afternoon, and on day 39 I decided to try and get this croc to be my companion. I carefully let it out of the water before towering up, and I tried to lead it, but I accidentally ignited it. Then yeah, I couldn't get down without it trying to kill me, so I had to do what I had to do. I then continued along the river into a much wider sandbank with darker water. And there were a ton of crocs here. The problem is, due to the darkness of the water, I couldn't even see most of them. I had no idea just how many crocs were around me. But soon enough it didn't matter, as I'd made it back to the ocean, where I quickly scooped up this lobster. Because guess what? This lobster is now my companion. That's right, meet the new Sherbert. Now the next few days were used up by a very annoying amount of coastal travel. See, I was up here and my base was somewhere down here. So I rode down the coast, having to go inland here and there. And then I had another close call with the shark. Yeah, one heart yet again. I used my dirt bombs on them, and then tried one out on land, before cooking some lobster while hiding Sherbert's eyes. And eventually, I spotted my base marker at the end of day 43. The next morning, I headed to my base and quickly got to work. I made a new chest and then named Sherbert, before doing a lot more interior work, and some branch detail. That's when this pillager group started to approach me. But apart from having my shield break, I easily took care of them, and then kept on with my work. On day 45, I decided that I was going to do a decent bit of base work here, as I really had to get the treehouse going. But that's when I realized that I had yet to visit both southern Madagascar and the far north of Madagascar. So, as I decided on which to hit next, I continued with my branch work, and figured out that, due to my antidote relic, I could now eat rotten flesh without the side effects. Next day, I had finished 2 of the 4 big branches, so I went out and collected a lot more leaves. And since the rest of the day was fairly uneventful, I'll use this time to tell you about a certain animal of Madagascar that was featured earlier. The fossa is towards the top of the food chain here in Madagascar, due to their intelligence and speed. This allows them to hunt and eat anything from birds to lemurs, as there just aren't many other carnivores here to do that for them. Of course, these guys are also native to Madagascar, as they're just another example of the exclusive life found here on this island. Big thanks to Marvinek and Poltergeist for making this custom mob. Just like the lemur, this will be linked in the description below. Now, on day 47, I decided that tomorrow would be my last housework day for a bit, but I still had a lot of work to do. With that being said, I decided that the north would be my next target, while I also started on the interior and made this staircase. This brings me to my final house day, where I put some leaves on these branches, added some staircase decorations, planted these palm saplings, detailed the trunk, and decided that before I left, I was going to craft a proper ship. So the next morning I went to craft a ship, but I realized that all of them needed more than the 2 leads that I had. But after looking through my items, I saw that I had this float, and with this plus my flippers, surely I would go fast in the water, right? Well, needless to say, yes, I was very fast. I ended up having to steal some wool from my marker to make a bed, but after that, yeah, I just swam, and look at how fast I am. This is gonna make travel a lot easier. Now, the next morning I woke up and realized that it was day 50. And normally I like to take this day to say thanks for watching this far into the video. Also, the comment who guessed the location first was Deadbeat Debonair. So congratulations, you win Mr. Beast. Now, as I dodge these sharks and continue my swimming, I also want to point out that I have a really cool Discord server, where I have daily travel trivia, and audio channels that play music for my videos. Also, one last thanks to the sponsor of this video, Name Hero. If you want your very own Minecraft server, remember to use the link in the description. Now, with that being said, back to the video. I kept along the scenic coast until I had to get some food. And yes, I once again covered Sherbert's eyes. Yet as I continued north, I eventually caught sight of a large structure. I remembered seeing the same structure in my Egypt video, which meant that it was a lighthouse. So I made my way up the lighthouse, and promptly got a jump scare. Okay. I quickly placed my water and cooled down, and this was the pattern that I used to explore the lighthouse. Walk up the stairs, overheat, then cool down. And that evening, I ended up powering the light. Next morning, I decided to continue on my way, until I saw some green hills, so I climbed them, and saw yet another structure in the distance. Only this one was a bit more hostile. I destroyed the spawner inside and found some decent loot that was just mostly food, only I still heard pillagers below me. So I went to look. and I ended up killing 2 of them. But I couldn't kill the 3rd one yet. No, this one was tough. Okay, that's alright. That was an interesting little roar. Okay. Yeah, he hit me so hard. I quickly got away and healed up. Oh, you stupid seagull. On day 53, I went to go and face the big pillager. Only he was not there, like, at all. I guess he just wandered off. But instead, I went to approach this village that was in the distance. And that's when I realized just where I was. Nosy Bay is an island in Madagascar that happens to be one of the country's hottest tourist spots, and it's not hard to see why. From the dramatic terrain to the scenic beaches, this tropical getaway has it all. Similarly to the Hawaiian Islands, Nosy Bay was formed by volcanoes, and evidence of that is still present in these crater lakes that dot the island. But as I approached the coastal village, I had something else in mind, and that was this pink terracotta that I could use for my base. So I stole some of the terracotta and some bread and lanterns, before then taking some white terracotta as well. And that evening I found a Frostwalker book, which could definitely be useful for my travels. Next morning I went to explore some more of this island, and that's when I spotted this boat off in the distance. So I brought out my spyglass. Probably... yeah, there you go. Whale shark. Dangerous. What? After a bit of indecisiveness, I just went for it. And yeah, there was no loot on the boat, but there were manatees, which was honestly pretty cool. After a while though, I headed for the mainland, and crafted some new leaf armor, before going further inland and spotting this big forest. I walked through the forest, and after a bit of treetop walking, I saw a mountain. A very big mountain. And yes, it looks as though you all get back-to-back wonders, as I had just found the tallest peak in Madagascar. Maro Macadro. At almost 10,000 feet, or roughly 3,000 meters, this volcano is the highest peak in Madagascar. And while I stated earlier that Peak Bobby is the tallest climbable peak, technically Maro Macadro is also climbable, if you're willing to spend 2 weeks slowly trekking up the side of it. Yeah, this incredible wonder is a stunning sight, but a difficult summit. I went up the mountain a little before heading around to the front of it. From here, I decided that I would want to be getting home again soon, as I had already found 2 wonders and 2 structures, making this a very successful expedition. So I started to head south, and on day 56 I continued this venture. I went for the coast as I was still pretty far north, but as I made the journey, I walked through some really nice scenery. After some more walking, I finally found the ocean, and now it was time to speedrun my trip home. With no sharks in the waters, I ended up making it pretty far, before spotting something the next morning. This beach shipwreck was bound to have some loot, but of course this is where I spotted the Makos. So I snuck in. Honestly, this loot was just okay, as I couldn't even really fit it in my inventory. After leaving the wreck though, I decided to swim as close to the Makos as possible, because this is what I do. I do stupid things. Yet they didn't really seem like they wanted to kill me. It was a bit odd, but I'm not complaining. With that being said, I continued swimming and made it to the other shark area that evening. This brings me to day 58, where I finally reached my base again. My new objective was to get some base progress done before exploring southern Madagascar, only it soon became hazy again, so I just gathered some leaves, as it was hard to tell if it was night or not. Next morning, I collected these palm logs from the saplings I had planted, and then started on the cabins up top. And I really love the color scheme here. Like, take a look at this. Anyways, I was starting to get really happy with my base progress. I could tell that this base was going to be good. That sentiment carried into day 60, where I gathered even more leaves, and started on the treetop. I then decided that before I explore southern Madagascar, I wanted to properly summit Peak Bobby first. So I placed some leaves and chopped some more palm logs. This brings me to my final day of housework for a while, and today is interior day. I built up my kitchen and then moved on to my study and bedroom. This is when I realized that these rooms are going to be tiny. But that didn't really bother me too much, as it's all about the aesthetic. Move aside, Property Brothers, because I'm coming in here with the cool design terms now. Like, aesthetic. Anyways, my base review would be on day 99. So, as long as I finished it before then, I would be fine. With that being said, I placed this painting in the stairwell. And this is where I'll mention that from now on in these videos, I will also be including art from each country. I just think it'll add another layer of themed design to my bases. I then finished the day with leaves. And the next morning, it was time for me to summit Bobby. But before I did so, I would need wool clothing. And there was only one structure nearby that had wool. So I swam out to the ship and dodged some sharks, before boarding the ship and finding some TNT. But after closing off the basement, I looked in this chest and found an insane amount of iron. 61. Like, I've never found so much before. I don't even know what to do with all this. Anyways, I was here to get wool, so that's what I did. And before I headed back, I had some fun. On day 63, it was finally time for me to, well, actually summit the mountain. I crafted my wool armor, and then left to the east, making it to Isalo around midday. I then passed the Centipede Cave, and followed this river into the sunset. Next morning, the river came to a dead end, so I just left it and kept in a straight line. And eventually, I found it. I immediately started climbing up the side of it, and just kept going. And this time, I wasn't even freezing, so I pressed on. And after a lot more climbing, I finally reached the summit. Of course, this is when I started to freeze, so I equipped my wool armor, but it wasn't enough. In a moment of panic, I quickly got out my crafting table and made more armor. And yeah, I did it just in time. And then I got to see a really cool sunset. Next morning, I stopped by the cabin again and took the chair and table from within it. I then started on my journey home, where I decided that I would be doing just a bit more work before heading south. But don't worry, I bundled these days together in a nice little bundle. I couldn't think of another word for bundle. Anyways, I got to my base, placed a lot of leaves, did the roofs, and did a lot of decorations. I also put Sherbert in her enclosure. And did a ton of wood stripping. Yeah, maybe choosing to have my entire tree be made from stripped wood wasn't the best idea. Well, too late now. On day 70, I began my southern expedition. First heading to the shore and killing some lobsters. And again, Sherbert was not present to witness any of this. But then I spotted some slimes, which I promptly killed, despite them actually doing some damage on me. I then continued through these sandy marshes just south of the coast. After spotting some tiny lizards, I saw a very shallow and very blue lake. Lake Simonapetsotsa is a salt lake in southern Madagascar that has a maximum depth of around 6 feet, or 2 meters. This allows for all kinds of birds to call this lake home. Now, the interesting thing about Simonapetsotsa is that there is no river connecting it to the ocean. So, how does it stay salty? Well, as it turns out, this lake has a source of underground seawater that then travels up into the lake water, thus keeping it both salty and another geographic anomaly of Madagascar. Now, I knew that there was a famous baobab tree around here as well, so I set off to find it, but found this cool little plant thing instead. Norway flashbacks aside, I saw a nice sunset that evening. Next morning, I spotted some wildlife nearby, like these frogs, boars, and crocs, before finding the famous baobab tree. Now, this baobab is known as the grandmother baobab, as it is said to be one of the oldest in the world. Anyways, as I continued south, I made my way into a very dry and deserty area, and that's when I heard an unusual amount of mobs spawning below me. After a bit more walking, however, I found that there had to be an underground structure, and upon entering it, a mine shaft is what I discovered. I collected some string, as with these slime balls, I can craft more leads, and maybe make a proper ship. I also collected this rice from this chest, and wandered around the eerie corridors of the mine shaft. The next morning, I mined up and out of the structure, and was met with a lot of crocs. Yet as I continued south, I finalized my next objective. See, there was one more wonder I wanted to hit, and it was on the complete opposite side of the island. So I wanted to craft a ship, which would hopefully get me there quickly, but my train of thought was soon interrupted by another structure, and when I went to approach it, I heard piglins. I climbed up the side of it and spotted this chest. After a very close call with whatever this is, I collected this obsidian, and then left for the shore. On day 73, when I went to craft the ship, I saw that I did not in fact have enough string. So I just need a ton of string, is what I'm gathering. So I went back to the mineshaft for more string, and made it there by early afternoon. I then survived a creeper attack, before collecting a lot more string. Next morning, I left the mine and headed back to the shore, where I got some lobster and filled my hunger bar. Anyways, I started crafting what I could of the ship, and on day 75, I finished crafting it entirely. But I had some trouble getting the sails down. How's this thing? Nope, that reloads my shaders. No, that don't. Did that also work? That's gonna be interesting. Alright. Oh, this just straight up murders lobsters. Difficulties and murders aside, after a bit of sailing, I asked myself a very important question. Is this ship slower than I was swimming alone? Well, before I came to a verdict, I passed the desert temple from before, and the float of crocs. See, I wanted to see how much progress I'd make by the end of the day. So, when I made it to the forest that evening, my verdict the next morning was, yes, I am definitely faster without the ship. So, I equipped my float and went wild. And you know what? I was determined to make it there today. That's right, I did not stop swimming for the entirety of the day. And just for reference, if I were to walk from the bottom of this map to the top of it, it would take me about an hour and a half. But with the power of my flippers and axolotl float, I was essentially a speedboat. Eventually though, the sun began to set, and I went to sleep. Except I'm lying, because I actually went even faster. Yeah, I don't know what compelled me to travel this much today, but here I am. And finally, late into the night, I spotted lights. The next morning, I woke up and looked around me, and sure enough, I was in Masawala National Park. Masawala is the largest national park in Madagascar, encompassing a dense rainforest, coastline, and much more. But this park is even more famous for hosting one of the most biodiverse regions in the country, as it contains around half of all exclusive plant and animal species within Madagascar. As I walked the shore, I ended up fighting these mobs, before stopping by this structure. Yet, as I did so, I noticed that these villagers were different. Barkeeper. Anyways, I entered the building and was very happy with all the decorations I saw. Do you have an espresso martini? Those seem to be all the rage these days. As I looked through the loot, I found a very important dish. In fact, it's Madagascar's national dish, romazava, which is essentially a stew consisting of meat, greens, and rice. But after taking some more food, I then turned my attention to the furniture. On day 78, I went out to explore the park. I followed this wooden bridge, and then swam through the river. I then saw this cool waterfall before continuing along the river paths. It honestly felt like I was back in Hawaii, even though those islands are on the opposite end of the world. Geography is just cool like that. If you come any closer, it's over. Yeah, that's what I thought. Next day, I walked along the shore, before spotting this shipwreck, so I pulled out my spyglass to take a look. Oh, okay, yeah. Great white sharks have a reputation that I don't need to explain, and they have been spotted off the coast of northern Madagascar, although rarely. So I carefully waded into the water, before making a go for it. And landing myself on one half of the wreck. I then jumped across the ship in search of loot, and eventually did find some. The only really useful thing here though were these sunglasses that would boost my swim speed even further. However, I soon realized that I should be a bit more focused on the sharks. Ooh, okay, alright. After heading to the other end of the ship, I found no loot here. So I took this opportunity to zoom back to the shore. Thankfully in a safe manner. The next morning, I knew it was time for me to head home. So I went to say bye to the bartenders, only to see that they weren't there. Alright guys, it's been fun. Where'd the bartenders go? Either way, I got in the water and started on my journey. After all, I have a base to finish. And so, over the next few days, I made my journey home. Once I reached the ship from earlier, I actually decided to use it, as I had something planned for it with my base. Now with that being said, I planned on moving my base review up to day 94, as I wanted to take one last trip afterwards. Regardless though, it is time for me to rate Madagascar's difficulty. Madagascar was honestly harder than I thought it'd be to survive in. In fact, due to my record-breaking amount of times that I was left on either one heart or half a heart, Madagascar earns the title of the hardest location to date, with a score of 9.5 out of 10. On day 86, I then started on my last leg of base work, and I had a lot to do. I did the upstairs decorations, and made this tiki bar outside, before placing another painting. And on day 87, I just about finished the interior work, while placing all of my new decorations and collecting a ton of leaves. This brings me to day 88, which I dubbed Leaf Day. That's because I placed a ridiculous amount of leaves underneath this tree, and then collected even more as the day went on. But when a storm arrived, my day was cut short. Next morning, it was Strip Day. I should probably have named it something else. Anyways, I stripped the entire tree. This was a very painful process, but I guess a necessary one. I then did some more leafing that afternoon. The next day, I focused on the top of the tree that had definitely been neglected. So I made sure it was big enough to look proportionate, and placed a ton of leaves up here as well. And of course, on day 91, I had a near-death experience with this baby zombie. Madagascar couldn't just leave me alone for a few base work days, could it? Anyways, I finished the treetop before placing some more decorations. I also tried to figure out my plan with the ship, but I eventually decided that I'd just have to craft a new one. So on day 92, I headed for the skeleton ship. I killed some slime, and then, upon reaching the ship, got some wool. And finally, I crafted my new ship, before using the dynamite that I had been holding on to. Next day, I returned to my base, knowing that this was the final base work day for me, and this is when I would be placing my really cool base topper. Only it took quite a bit of prep to do so, but when I finally did place it, it looked genuinely so cool. And so, I had finished what has to be one of my favorite bases I've ever done. With that being said, it's time for base review. I woke up on day 94 and took a look through each room, before coming up with a verdict. Starting with the stairwell, I really like this stairwell. It's simple, but Thanks to the paintings and decor, it provides a really nice entrance to the base. Next, the kitchen. Yeah, I know this kitchen is tiny, but I like it more than my Thailand kitchen. Only because I can manage smaller spaces better, but yeah, it is still tiny. The same can be said for my bedroom and study, which look nice aesthetically, but are, well, yeah, small. But then once we step out to the tiki bar, the space changes as it's a lot more open, and overall really nice. Finally, the exterior, which is of course the best part of the base. Yeah, the ship is just so cool. But the tree itself was the most ambitious thing I've done for a base, and it really paid off. So my overall base rating is a very solid 8 out of 10. Let me know what your rating is in the comments. With that being said, on day 95, I collected sherbet and started on my final trip. You guys can probably hear, but I have the AC on. For those of you in the States, you'll know it's very warm this summer. That's why I've been a bit quiet in-game these last few days. Man, is it warm. I then ended up using my ship again, and I made it to the Croc Cove that evening. I then sailed through the shark waters, and after checking inland a few times, I reached my destination at sunset. On day 97, I brought sherbet to this little pond and said my goodbyes, before deciding to finally use my god apple on this enderman. I couldn't just let it go to waste. I then walked all the way to the path, and continued along it way into the evening. Next morning I headed for my ship, and then started home, making it back on the evening of day 99. And that brings me to day 100, where I made one last walk to my base, while thinking about just how amazing Madagascar had been. See, Madagascar is a country that has an incredibly troubled past, from its colonial timeline to its struggles as a nation. But what makes this country unlike any other are the countless wonders and animals unique to this island, because Madagascar really is the 8th continent. And now I'm afraid it is about that time. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.